I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the glow of my laptop screen. The cursor blinked impatiently at me, waiting for my next move, but my fingers hovered uselessly above the keys. I should have been working. I had a project deadline looming, a new high-rise design for a client who expected perfection, but I couldn't focus. Not tonight. The quiet hum of the house that I once found comforting now felt like it was pressing in on me, suffocating me with its silence. Rachel was upstairs, probably already asleep, and that thought alone twisted my stomach into knots. Lately, everything about our life together felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something had shifted between us. The spark that used to pull me toward her had dulled into a routine of pleasantries, schedules, and obligatory conversations. I used to think that was just the natural progression of marriage. 10 years together, and you couldn't expect everything to stay as thrilling as it was in the beginning, right? But it was more than that. The distance between us wasn't just emotional, it was physical too. We barely touched anymore. The nights when we would curl up together after dinner and talk about anything, our days, our dreams, our future, felt like they belonged to someone else, someone I didn't recognize. In my mind, I told myself this was normal. People change, marriages change. But then, there were nights like tonight when I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that I was missing something. I sighed and clicked over to my email, thinking maybe I'd check on work to distract myself. As I scrolled through the inbox, deleting junk, something caught my eye, an unfamiliar subject line. My first instinct was that it was spam, but then I noticed it was an email thread between Rachel and someone named Derek. I didn't know a Derek, and yet here he was, in my wife's inbox, under a series of back-and-forth emails I had never seen before. My heart thudded in my chest as I clicked on the thread. The messages were vague at first, just casual, friendly conversation, but the further I scrolled, the more intimate they became. Words like, "I can't stop thinking about you," and "last night was amazing," leaped off the screen. It felt like someone had punched me in the gut. My hands started to shake as I scrolled faster, not really sure what I was searching for, but knowing that every message I read would only make it worse. The last email in the chain was from Derek, sent just a few hours ago. "I can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Same place?" The bile rose in my throat. Tomorrow. Tomorrow she was going to meet him. For what? Another night like the one he couldn't stop thinking about? My mind raced with images I didn't want to picture. I slammed the laptop shut and leaned back against the couch, trying to catch my breath. My world had just shifted, tilted violently on its axis, and I didn't know how to stop the freefall. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. My mind screamed at me to run upstairs and demand answers, to yell, to ask her how she could do this to me, to us. But I knew I couldn't. I wasn't ready. My head was spinning too fast, trying to piece together how long this had been going on and how I had been so blind to it. Instead, I sat there, numb, staring at the dark screen of the laptop that had just destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. Time blurred. I don't know how long I stayed like that, sitting on the couch in stunned silence, before I finally moved. When I did, it wasn't to storm upstairs or call Rachel out on her lies. It was to open the laptop again, my fingers trembling as I logged into social media and typed Derek into the search bar. There were a lot of Dereks, but I found him pretty quickly. Derek Miller. He worked with Rachel. Same company, same department. That explained how they knew each other, at least. His profile picture showed a man who looked about my age, maybe a few years younger. Clean-cut, good-looking in that easy, effortless way. The kind of guy you wouldn't look twice at in a crowd, but would notice if he smiled directly at you. He looked normal, average, not the type of person who would blow up my entire life. I stared at his photo, and something inside me cracked. Anger swelled, hot and heavy in my chest, but I swallowed it down. I needed to know more. I needed to understand how Rachel had gotten to this point, what she saw in him that she didn't see in me anymore. Clicking through his profile, I found pictures of him at work events, out with friends, nothing unusual. But then there were the comments, the likes. I saw Rachel's name pop up here and there, little digital breadcrumbs that I had never noticed before. I started piecing together the timeline, trying to figure out how long this had been going on behind my back. Months? A year? It felt like I was unraveling a mystery I didn't want to solve, but I couldn't stop. I needed to know everything. As I scrolled deeper into his life, something inside me began to shift. The anger that had been bubbling beneath the surface hardened into something colder, more calculating. I could confront Rachel right now, but what would that accomplish? She'd deny it, lie, maybe even cry. She'd tell me what she thought I wanted to hear, but I still wouldn't understand why. Why him? Why now? No, confronting her wouldn't give me the answers I needed. I had to go deeper. I had to know what she was thinking, what she was feeling when she was with him, and the only way to do that was to become him. The idea hit me like a flash of lightning. Insane. But it made sense in that moment of desperation. If I pretended to be Derek, just for a little while, just long enough to understand, I could get inside her head, see what she saw. I could learn why she was doing this, why she had turned away from me. The plan was risky, dangerous even, but my mind had already latched onto it like a lifeline. I couldn't let go. I set the laptop down, my thoughts racing ahead of me. Tomorrow. Tomorrow she was meeting him. But what if I was there instead? I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see were those emails, the words echoing in my head like some twisted loop I couldn't shut off. I can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Same place? Over and over, that line ran through my mind. It made me sick, thinking of her smiling at him, sneaking around behind my back. How long had this been going on? How had I missed it? But more than that, why him? What was it about Derek that made her do this to me, to us? These questions gnawed at me until I couldn't take it anymore. I got out of bed and paced the living room, my mind racing. The plan I'd thought of earlier, the crazy, dangerous plan, still lingered in the back of my mind, but the more I thought about it, the more it started to make sense. If I pretended to be Derek, I could get into Rachel's head. I could find out what she wasn't telling me. I could understand. I had to understand. But how? How could I pull this off? I grabbed my laptop again and started digging. I found Derek's social media profiles: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. He didn't post much, but there was enough there for me to learn about him. He was single, no kids, worked in sales, same company as Rachel. He was just another guy, nothing special. So why did Rachel choose him? I studied his photos, the way he carried himself. He had that effortless confidence, that easy smile. Was that it? Was he just fun? Was that all Rachel wanted? Something easy? Something exciting? I kept scrolling, looking for clues. Then I found it, a post from Derek about an upcoming business trip. He was leaving for a conference this weekend. The timing couldn't have been better. If he was out of town, then maybe, just maybe, I could step into his shoes for a little while, just long enough to find out what was really going on between them. My heart pounded as the plan started to solidify in my mind. Tomorrow, Rachel was supposed to meet him, but instead, I would be there. I'd create a fake profile, send her a message from Derek, and set up the meeting. She wouldn't know the difference. I'd play the part, get the answers I needed, and then, well, I didn't know what came after that. But right now, I couldn't think that far ahead. I just knew I had to do this. I had to know the truth. The next morning, I felt like a man possessed. I skipped work, ignored my emails, and spent the entire day setting up my fake profile. It wasn't hard. Derek wasn't exactly a private person. I copied his photos, mimicked his casual tone, and sent Rachel a message. Hey, change of plans. Let's meet somewhere else tonight. Thought it might be nice to switch things up. What do you think? My hands shook as I hit send. I had no idea if this would work, if she'd even respond, but within minutes, my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. Sure. Where? My stomach flipped. She didn't suspect a thing. I quickly typed back, suggesting a different bar in the next town over. Somewhere far enough from home that no one would recognize us, but still close enough that I could manage. She agreed without hesitation. My heart raced. This was really happening. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, going over the plan in my head. How would I act? What would I say? Could I really pull this off? Part of me was terrified, but another part, the part that needed answers, pushed me forward. I had to do this. I had to know why. That evening, I drove to the bar early, arriving before Rachel. I found a quiet corner and waited, my heart pounding in my chest. Every minute felt like an eternity. Then, finally, she walked in. My breath caught in my throat. There she was, My wife, looking beautiful and confident, like nothing was wrong, like she wasn't about to meet her lover behind my back. She scanned the room, looking for Derek, looking for me. I stood up, my legs shaky, and walked over to her. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice low and casual, like I imagined Derek would. She smiled, she actually smiled, and I felt a sick twist of jealousy in my gut. "Hey," she said, leaning in for a quick hug. "I was surprised when you suggested a new place. This is nice," I forced a smile. "Yeah, just thought we could use a change of scenery." I could barely keep my voice steady. How was she not seeing through me? How was she not noticing? But she didn't. She just smiled again, that same easy, carefree smile, and sat down across from me. For the next hour, I pretended to be Derek. I asked her about her day, made small talk, tried to keep the conversation light. Inside, I was screaming. I wanted to ask her why she was doing this, why she was betraying me, but I couldn't. Not yet. I had to play the part. I had to see this through. And then, slowly, she started to open up. She talked about work, about how stressful things had been lately. She mentioned feeling trapped, like she was stuck in a routine she couldn't break out of. My heart clenched. Was that how she felt about us? "I just needed something different, she said, her voice soft. "Something exciting." I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. "I get that." But inside, I was screaming. "I'm your husband. I could have given you that. Why didn't you talk to me?" But I didn't say any of that. I just sat there, listening to her talk about how Derek made her feel alive, how he made her feel like herself again. It was like a knife to the chest, but I couldn't stop listening. I needed to know. I needed to understand. By the time we left the bar, I felt like I was in a daze. Rachel gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, a kiss that wasn't meant for me, and thanked me for a nice night. I watched her walk away, my heart heavy with the weight of everything I had just learned. She didn't suspect a thing. She didn't know that the man she had just confided in was her husband, not her lover. And that hurt more than anything. I drove home in silence, my mind racing. I had gotten some answers tonight, but not all of them. Not enough. I needed to know more. I needed to understand the full picture. And to do that, I'd have to keep pretending. This wasn't over yet. The next few days felt like I was living someone else's life. I had managed to pull it off once, but could I really keep pretending to be Derek? The thought haunted me as I went through the motions of my daily routine. Rachel acted completely normal at home. She had no idea that her secret was unraveling right in front of her, or that her husband had been the one sitting across from her at the bar instead of Derek. I replayed that night in my mind over and over, dissecting every word she had said. Something exciting. That's what she wanted. Something I hadn't given her in years, apparently. The realization stung, but instead of confronting her, I found myself more determined to continue. I had to keep going. I had to see just how deep this affair went, to understand everything she felt for him and what I had become in her eyes. So I set up another meeting, messaging Rachel again as Derek. "I can't stop thinking about the other night," I wrote. "Let's meet again, somewhere more private this time." My heart pounded as I hit send. I was stepping further into the lie, but at this point, I was in too deep to turn back. She replied almost instantly, agreeing without hesitation. My stomach churned. Did she really not suspect anything? Or had she grown so comfortable in her deceit that she didn't even bother to question the inconsistencies? The thought made my chest tighten with anger, but I swallowed it down. The next night, I told Rachel I had to stay late at work. She barely looked up from her phone when I said it, just nodded and muttered something about ordering takeout. It was as if I wasn't even there. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to shake her out of this apathy she had toward our marriage, but instead, I grabbed my keys and left. I had a role to play. I arrived at the hotel I had booked for our meeting, my nerves shot, my hands clammy. This was different. A hotel room wasn't a bar. It was intimate, personal, the kind of place where people crossed lines they couldn't uncross. I felt sick to my stomach, but I had to keep it together. I had to see this through. When Rachel arrived, she looked nervous too, but in a different way. Excited, maybe? Her eyes lit up when she saw me. No, not me, Derek. She smiled, that same carefree smile that she never gave me anymore, and my heart sank. "Hey," she said softly, stepping closer. "This is nice. Different." I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to smile back. Yeah, I thought we could use a little privacy. She kissed me then. A quick, tentative kiss that should have meant nothing, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. I wasn't sure what I had expected, but the reality of her kissing me while believing I was someone else made my skin crawl. She pulled back, not noticing my hesitation, and walked into the room, taking in the space. "This is perfect," she said, her voice light and breezy, like we were on some sort of date. I stood there for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts, before I followed her in. We sat down on the edge of the bed, and she immediately launched into conversation, talking about work, about how much she enjoyed these little escapes with Derek. My chest tightened again as I listened, forcing myself to nod along like I was supposed to. How could she be so casual about this? About everything she was throwing away. And then, just like before, she started to open up. She told me, or rather Derek, about how things with Ethan, with me, had grown stale. "We're just stuck," she said, staring down at her hands. "It's not that I don't love him. I do. But it's different now. It's not enough." I clenched my fists, the words slicing through me. Not enough. That's what I was to her now. Not enough. I wanted to scream, to tell her that I could have been enough if she had just talked to me, if she had given me a chance to fix things. But I stayed silent, letting her pour her heart out to the man she thought she wanted. "It's like I'm not even myself anymore," she continued. "I used to be fun, spontaneous, but now I feel like I'm just going through the motions. And Derek," she caught herself smiling awkwardly at me, "I mean, you make me feel like myself again, like I can breathe." I felt like I was going to be sick. This was worse than I had imagined. It wasn't just some fling for her. This was about more than excitement. This was about her finding something in Derek that she didn't think she could find with me. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, but before I could process it, she leaned in closer, her hand brushing against mine. I froze, my mind racing. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep this up. I had gotten some of the answers I needed, but hearing them from her, seeing the way she looked at me, at Derek, it was too much. I had to get out of there. I had to stop before I crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I should go," I stammered, standing up abruptly. Rachel blinked, surprised. "What? Why?" She looked hurt, confused, like she had no idea why I would suddenly back out now. "Did I say something wrong?" "No," I said quickly, avoiding her gaze. "It's just, I'm not feeling great. Long day at work, I'm sorry." The lie tumbled out of my mouth, clumsy and desperate, but she didn't seem to question it. She just stood there, frowning slightly as I grabbed my coat. "Okay," she said softly, her voice tinged with disappointment. "I guess I'll see you later?" I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything more. I bolted out of the hotel room before she could say another word, my heart pounding in my chest. The cool night air hit me like a shock, but it didn't calm me down. My head was spinning, my emotions a tangled mess. I had thought I could handle this. I had thought I could pretend to be Derek long enough to understand why she was doing this. But now that I had seen it firsthand, now that I had heard the words come out of her mouth, I realized just how far gone our marriage really was. This wasn't just some fling. This wasn't just about excitement or boredom. Rachel had built something with Derek, something real, something that I hadn't even known was missing in our relationship. And now I was left standing outside a hotel, my mind reeling with the truth I had fought so hard to uncover. I drove home in a daze, barely aware of the road in front of me. When I finally pulled into the driveway, I sat there for a long time, staring at the house that had once felt like my sanctuary. Now it felt like a lie, just like everything else. I couldn't go inside. I couldn't face Rachel, not after everything I had just learned. But I couldn't keep pretending either. This had to end, one way or another. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. I had enough answers to know what I was dealing with now. But there were still so many questions. How long had this been going on? How deep was her connection to Derek? And most importantly, was there anything left to salvage between us? Or was our marriage already too far gone? I didn't know, but I had to find out, and I couldn't do that while pretending to be someone else. It was time to confront Rachel, to lay everything out on the table. No more pretending, no more lies, just the cold, hard truth. I got out of the car and walked up to the front door, my heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. One way or another, everything was about to change. I stood in front of the door, my hand frozen on the handle. The house, the one that had been my home for a decade, now felt like a place I didn't belong. Rachel was in there, probably going about her evening like nothing had changed, like she hadn't kissed another man, spilled her heart out to him about how she was suffocating in our marriage. The thought made my stomach turn, and for a second, I considered getting back in the car and driving away. But I couldn't run from this anymore. I had to face her, face the truth. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The house was quiet, too quiet. Rachel wasn't in the living room, and I didn't hear any movement from the kitchen. I walked slowly through the house, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure how to start this conversation, but I knew there was no turning back. I found her in the bedroom, sitting on the bed with her legs tucked underneath her, reading a book. She looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence between us. The air felt heavy, charged with all the things we weren't saying. "Hey," she said casually, like everything was fine, like she hadn't just met up with her lover an hour ago. "You're home earlier than I expected. How was work?" The sound of her voice, so normal and unaffected, made something snap inside me. How could she act like this? Like everything was perfectly fine? I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't pretend. "Rachel, we need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She blinked, surprised by my tone, but there was something else in her eyes, something that looked like guilt. "Okay," she said slowly, closing her book and setting it on the nightstand. "What's going on?" I swallowed hard, trying to gather the courage to say what I needed to say. "I know," I said, my voice shaking. "I know about you and Derek." Her face paled instantly, the color draining from her cheeks. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. Instead, she just stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but it was clear from her expression that she knew exactly what I was talking about. I shook my head, my hands trembling at my sides. "Don't lie to me, Rachel. I've known for a while now. I saw the emails. I know about the affair." She sat there in stunned silence for a moment before finally finding her voice. "Ethan, I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't even know how it started. Things between us, they haven't been right for a long time. And Derek, he was there, and it just happened." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "It just happened?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Rachel, we've been married for 10 years. You don't just accidentally fall into an affair. This was a choice. You made a choice to betray me." She flinched at the anger in my voice, but I couldn't stop. The floodgates had opened, and all the emotions I had been bottling up came pouring out. "Why didn't you talk to me?" I demanded, my hands shaking with frustration. "Why didn't you tell me that you were unhappy? We could have worked on it. We could have tried to fix things. But instead, you went behind my back." "I didn't know how," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't know how to tell you that I was unhappy. Every time I tried, it felt like you weren't really listening. You were always so wrapped up in your work, in your own world, and I felt like I was disappearing. Derek, he made me feel seen. He made me feel like I mattered again." Her words stung, each one like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. But beneath the anger and the hurt, I could hear the truth in what she was saying. I had been distant. I had thrown myself into my work, convincing myself that it was for us, for our future. But in the process, I had neglected the most important thing in my life, my marriage. I sat down on the edge of the bed, running a hand through my hair. "Rachel, I know I've been distant. I know I haven't been the best husband, but that doesn't justify what you did." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted things to end up like this." We sat there in silence for what felt like an eternity, the weight of everything hanging between us. The betrayal, the lies, the years of neglect, all of it had finally come to a head, and now we were left with the shattered pieces of our marriage. "What now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Rachel wiped at her eyes, sniffling softly. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't want to lose you, Ethan, but I don't know if we can fix this." I stared at her, my mind racing. Could we fix this? Could we ever go back to the way things were before? I didn't know. Part of me wanted to try, to fight for our marriage, but another part of me was so broken, so angry, that I didn't know if I could ever truly forgive her. I need time, I said finally, standing up. I need time to think. She nodded, not saying anything, and I turned and walked out of the room. The house felt suffocating, too small to hold everything that had just happened. I needed air. I needed space. I grabbed my coat and walked out the door, the cool night air hitting my face like a slap. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay here. I walked aimlessly through the streets, my mind a swirling mess of emotions. How had it come to this? How had our marriage fallen apart so completely without me even realizing it? I felt like a fool, a blind, stupid fool who had let his wife slip away right under his nose. I thought about what Rachel had said, that she felt like she was disappearing, like I wasn't really seeing her anymore. And I couldn't deny it. She was right. I had been so focused on my career, on providing for us, that I had stopped paying attention to the little things. The way she smiled, the way she laughed, the way she used to light up when we were together. I had taken her for granted, and now I was paying the price. But that didn't excuse what she had done. It didn't make the betrayal any less painful. I stopped walking, standing on a quiet street corner, staring up at the sky. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to confront Derek, to demand answers from him, but what good would that do? The problem wasn't just him. It was me, and Rachel, and everything that had gone wrong between us. I had to decide if I was willing to fight for our marriage, or if it was time to walk away. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. I wasn't ready to make that decision yet. I needed more time. I needed to figure out if there was anything left to save. I turned and started walking back toward the house, my heart heavy with the weight of everything that had just happened. When I got back, the house was dark. Rachel had gone to bed, and the silence was deafening. I stood in the living room for a long time, staring at the shadows on the wall, before finally making my way upstairs. I slipped into bed beside Rachel, but the distance between us felt like a chasm. I didn't know if we could ever bridge that gap, but for now, all I could do was lie there, wide awake, and try to figure out what came next. The next morning, the weight of everything that had been said the night before still hung over me like a dark cloud. Rachel and I barely spoke. It was a strange, almost eerie silence that filled the house as we went through the motions of our normal routines. She made coffee. I pretended to read the news on my phone. Neither of us acknowledged the elephant in the room, the confession, the affair, the broken pieces of our marriage scattered between us. I kept replaying her words in my head. I didn't mean for it to happen, and I don't know how it started. How was I supposed to believe that? An affair didn't just happen. It wasn't some accident you stumbled into. It was a series of choices, each one deliberate, each one taking her further away from me. And then there was the other part, how she said I didn't see her anymore. She had felt invisible, lost, like she wasn't herself anymore. I understood that on some level. I had been wrapped up in my own world, my work, trying to build a future for us. But hadn't I done that for her? For us? I glanced over at her as she quietly sipped her coffee at the kitchen table. She looked so normal, like the woman I'd known for years, but now there was this chasm between us, this gulf filled with all the lies and secrets that she'd built with Derek. It made me sick to think about it, to think about how much of our life together had been a lie. How many times had she smiled at me, laughed with me, while secretly planning to meet him? I couldn't take it. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor as I pushed it back. Rachel looked up at me, startled. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice soft, tentative, like she didn't want to disturb the fragile peace that had settled over us since last night. "I need to clear my head," I muttered, grabbing my jacket off the back of the chair. I need to think." She didn't say anything. She just nodded, her eyes dropping to the table, like she couldn't bear to look at me. I felt a wave of anger rise up in my chest, but I swallowed it down. What was the point of lashing out now? It wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't undo what she had done. I left the house and drove aimlessly for a while, not really sure where I was going or what I was hoping to find. I just knew I couldn't be in that house right now. I couldn't be around her. around the reminders of everything we had lost. Eventually, I ended up at a park near the edge of town, a quiet place where I used to go when I needed to clear my mind. I parked the car and sat there for a few minutes, staring out at the empty playground, the swing swaying gently in the breeze. My mind was racing, but I couldn't seem to settle on a single thought. Everything felt too big, too overwhelming. I got out of the car and started walking along the path that wound through the park, my hands shoved deep into my pockets. The cool air helped a little, clearing away some of the fog that had settled over my brain, but it didn't take away the pain. Nothing would take that away. As I walked, I thought about the confrontation last night, about Rachel's tears and her apologies. I knew she was sorry. I could see it in her eyes, hear it in her voice, but was sorry enough? Was it enough to fix everything that had been broken between us? I didn't know. I didn't know if anything could fix this. I stopped by the edge of the pond, staring down at my reflection in the water. I barely recognized the man staring back at me. He looked tired, worn out, beaten down by everything that had happened. I had spent so long trying to build a perfect life for Rachel and me, trying to be the perfect husband, the perfect provider. And now, here I was, standing in the wreckage of that life, wondering if it had ever been real to begin with. I thought about confronting Derek. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to look him in the eye and demand answers. Why Rachel? Why now? What did he have that I didn't? But I knew it wouldn't change anything. Confronting him would only make me angrier, more bitter. He wasn't the real problem. The problem was between Rachel and me, and it had been building for years, long before Derek had ever entered the picture. I sat down on a bench by the water, rubbing my hands over my face. I felt exhausted, mentally and emotionally drained. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to try to save our marriage, to fight for it, but another part of me, maybe a bigger part, wasn't sure it was worth saving anymore. How could I trust her again after this? How could I ever look at her and not see the lies, the betrayal? I stayed at the park for what felt like hours, just sitting there, lost in thought. Eventually, I knew I had to go back. I couldn't avoid this forever. I couldn't just sit here and hope that everything would magically fix itself. I had to face it, face her. When I got home, the house was still quiet. Rachel was sitting on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, like she had been waiting for me. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes searching my face for some kind of clue as to what I was thinking. I didn't give her one. I couldn't. I wasn't even sure what I was thinking anymore. "We need to talk," I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. She nodded, her expression solemn, and I sat down across from her. "Do you want to work on this?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. "Do you want to try and fix what's left of our marriage?" Rachel hesitated, her eyes dropping to the floor. For a moment, I thought she was going to say no, that she was going to tell me she wanted to be with Derek instead. But then she looked up at me, tears brimming in her eyes again. "Yes," she said softly. "I do. I don't want to lose you, Ethan. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you, but I still love you. I still want us." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. Part of me had been bracing for her to say the opposite, to tell me she didn't want to work on it, that she had chosen Derek over me. But now that she was saying she wanted to try, I didn't know how to feel. Relief? Anger? Confusion? Maybe all three at once. "I don't know if I can trust you again," I admitted, my voice raw. "I don't know if I can ever get past what you did." "I understand," she whispered. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I know I have to earn your trust back, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Ethan. I want to fix this." We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of her words hanging between us. I believed her. I could see in her eyes that she was sincere, that she really did want to make things right. But was that enough? Could we ever truly go back to the way things were before? "I need time," I said finally. "I need time to figure out if I can get past this, if we can move forward." Rachel nodded, wiping away a tear that had slipped down her cheek. "I understand. I'll give you as much time as you need." We didn't talk much after that. There wasn't much left to say. We both knew that this wasn't going to be an easy fix. It was going to take time, patience, and a lot of hard work if we were ever going to rebuild what had been broken. That night, I slept on the couch. It wasn't a decision we discussed. It just happened. The bed felt too close, too intimate, too much like a place where trust should exist. I couldn't be in that space with her. Not yet. As I lay there, staring up at the ceiling, my mind wouldn't stop racing. I knew Rachel wanted to try. I knew she was sorry. But could I ever truly forgive her? Could I ever trust her again? And even if I could, was our marriage worth saving? Or had we already lost too much? Those were the questions that haunted me as I drifted off to sleep, knowing that the hardest decisions were still ahead.